Mishmash! Kitbash Corner!
Heya, today we get a sequel of sorts to my original Inquisitorial kitbash video. For this video, however, I ended up kitbashing the Hexbane's Hunter's kit from Age of Sigmar. I don't know much of anything regarding the lore of these miniatures, but man do they look like they could make for some seriously cool Inquisitors. I figured this could kinda work with what I said in the last video, being that I might end up kitbashing more figures to build the remaining units that I didn't build with the base kit. And I kinda did. Sort of. Yeah, a couple of these guys will most likely serve more as stand-ins for other models like Scions, Khazarkin, or Sisters of Silence, but hey, cool models are cool models. And before we get into the kit bashing, please make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe for more kit bashing videos like this. It helps a lot. So first, I'm kit bashing this huge brute dude. Every figure in this kit appeals to me in some way, but the simplicity of this model and his design and sheer size really make him stand out and shine amongst the more proportional string bean miniatures that we have in the base kit. He's more on scale with the Servitor drone, which I think makes him look really cool. To start him out, I'm gluing him to the same 28mm base to keep him consistent with his squad mates. To do this, I'm using super glue. The bases that come with the Hexbane kit are awesome, but they are a little inconsistent in terms of size for a kill team, so I'll save these for later. I also took the time to pinch off this huge cleaver from his belt, as I have more than a few ideas for replacement trinkets. And just a fair warning, I'm not doing anything with the dogs in this kit. I'll have something planned for them later. I begin to snip away at the huge wood axe, leaving just his arms intact. After I'm good and happy with that, I begin to trim this piece from the Khador gang set. I believe this piece comes from the Icon Bearer. The other half of this piece was actually used in the Chaos Kit Bash video. Just something for you to check out later. I then glue it in place into his hands, and it ended up gluing the other side as kind of a pommel of sorts. I ultimately decided I didn't really care for how this looked, and I found a replacement later on. At the end of this polearm, I'd glue on a classic Space Marine chainsword to form some sort of huge chain pole. I'd fix this in place using a mixture of sprue goo and Tamiya cement. I wasn't sure about this at first as it took a lot of fiddling, but once it was in place I was quite happy with it. For this next bit, I decided to do a little bit of sculpting. I'd mix together some green stuff and I'd adhere it to the back of the model. I do this to obscure these details as I just don't really want to shave them off. I'd eventually mold these 3 thin strips of green stuff together to form one consistent cape. Not quite a bold and brash cape, more of a tattered, ratty cape. This is quite similar to the cape I designed for the Kettle Helm Kit Bash video if you haven't seen it. However, this time I decided to go into a little bit more detail, and I decided this cape should be a little bit bigger. I'd slowly but surely go back in and continuously cut in these little details to reshape the cape whenever I added in more green stuff. Like with every project on the channel, there's a lot of improvising. And again, like I always say, I strongly suggest planning this out beforehand. This certainly isn't my best work when it comes to green stuff, but I don't think it looks terrible. Once it's painted, I'm sure he'll look great. I let the green stuff settle in for a bit as I glued on this makeshift pommel, which came from a Skitarii backpack. This is an incense burner of sorts, I'm not really sure. I then moved back onto the head, and I ended up snipping off the original and plastering on one from the Orlok gang set. Once the head was in place, I would tear away slightly at the cape with my knife as it dried. I'm doing this not only to add a little bit of damage and realism to it, but I'm also doing this to balance it out geometrically. Green stuff tends to sag, so once it's partially dry, it's a good opportunity to pull it away and make it look a little less saggy. Next, I begin to clip and slice away at the big stake mallet on his satchel, diligently getting rid of all the remnants before gluing on this thing of scrolls and a grenade from the Horus Heresy Marine set. On the other side of his belt, I'd use a similar bit, this being from one of the trinkets of the Primaris Aggressor set. Once it's snipped, it fits perfectly onto his belt, and I think this looks really good. For one final element of this miniature, I decided to use a piece of wire and this Inquisitorial symbol from the Deathwatch upgrade kit. I don't know if he necessarily needs this, as painting on the Inquisition symbol could also work, but I feel like having an actual physical representation of the Inquisition itself looks a little bit better. All in all, I think this guy looks like an absolute beast. He's practically a Space Marine neophyte with how burly he is, and he'll stand out significantly amongst all the other miniatures on the tabletop. So for this next Inquisitor, I already knew this was going to be a cool figure. The pose is great, the sculpt is amazing, and I really don't have to do much to add on to the coolness factor. All we gotta do is just make this character look a little bit more 40k-esque. First, we'll be sanding down and gluing on this weird fidget toy thing from the Primaris Sternguard set. I have no idea what this thing is supposed to be, and I invite you to educate me in the comments. To which I will ignore it, because there's no way this thing isn't some weird fidget toy for a child. For a pistol, I shaved down the flintlock and replaced it with a las pistol from the Tempestus Scions kit. I now realize I really like to cannibalize certain kits to an almost autistic level. The Scions kit, the Cawdor gangs. What can I say? Some kits are just made for kit bashing. Nothing more, nothing less. I have never built a Scion nor a Cawdor gang member. Next, I decided to beef up the miniature and I glued on these pauldrons from an old Chimera kit. The more simplistic elements of kit bashing are always the most fun to me. Doing little things like this really make the miniature look all that much better. For her other hand, I decided to slice away the axe and replace it with an auto pistol. In hindsight, I probably should have used a plasma pistol instead of a las pistol, as it could fully replace the Pistolier from the original kit. But I just really like how this las pistol looks. I kinda have a soft spot for him. But at the end of the day, you could just use a plasma pistol instead, and who really cares? She has whatever the data card says she does. I should also probably mention that I snipped away at her head at the beginning. Her tiny little head is really creepy, and I don't like it. To replace it, I ended up using a more knightly Skitarii head. I ended up clipping it directly in half, as I think it would fit nicely into the turtleneck. And it did. Initially, I left the head sculpt as is, and I thought it looked pretty cool up until I realized that it would make her head look like it was 1.5 feet tall. I'd end up filling any gaps using a little bit of sprue goo, but it turned out to be a perfect fit as is, and I really didn't have to do much. And as one final little detail, I gave her a servo skull from the Firstborn Devastators kit. This is barely even a kit bash method. I just really like how servo skulls look with any Inquisitorial miniature. Plus, the pose of the servo skull really balances out the miniature overall. And with that, this miniature is easily my favorite of this set. The pose is striking, and I love being able to retain a good portion of the original miniature if I can help it when it comes to kit bashing. I truly cannot wait to paint this mini. Up next, we have the miniature that is easily the most Inquisitorial looking mini of the entire set. For this, I started by snipping away their flintlock and replacing it with the plasma pistol. Again, I probably should have swapped this for the Pistolier, but who gives a brap. For the free hand, I began Frankensteining an Inquisitorial icon, this being that weird battle standard from the Steelhelms kit. The top part of the original icon was completely removed short of the candles, leaving me with a lot of negative space. To fix this, I'd construct a proper icon by gluing on this Inquisition symbol from the Deathwatch kit again. I'd also use the skull from the other battle standard, and he'd fit very nicely. You'll also notice that I applied a lot of sprue goo to this mini to seal up any areas that did not glue together or fit together properly. This is easily one of the worst push-fit minis I've ever had to deal with. They look great, don't get me wrong, but oh my gosh, this thing was fiddly. It's a million tiny pieces, and it really does require glue if you want it to look good. I really don't find myself complaining a lot about assembling miniatures, but this was just a pain in the ass. I then felt like the symbol was a little shrimpy, so I just added on a second one, as the upgrade kit comes with 2 of them. I'd smelt the pieces together using some Tamiya and a little bit of sprue goo, and I think this looks really good. It's a little rudimentary, and I know the footage makes him look a little off balance, but I assure you I fixed this off camera. Next, I'd snip away at this guy's stake hammer as well, this time being a little bit more lazy and aggressive in my approach. Because the miniature is hollow, being that they're a push fit, this looks really weird. So I simply sealed it up using this baton and radio thing from the original Inquisitorial kit. You'll also probably notice this little coil thing from the Skitarii backpack on top of the hat. Just a cute little extra detail. To spice up the back of the icon, I used a big piece of parchment paper from an old Space Marine kit. I'm like 99% sure this comes from a command squad, but correct me if I'm wrong. Once I was close to finishing the miniature, I decided to pull off the original battle standard handle. I felt that a wooden handle would be a little crude for an Inquisitor, being that these guys are typically well equipped. So I replaced it using a bit from the same Kettle Helms box, in the form of this metal flagpole. It fits a little bit better and it looks better, and once that was in place, I'd call this goober done. Despite being a pain in the ass to assemble, this miniature looks really good at the end of the day. If it wasn't obvious from the get-go, this miniature was the main inspiration for making these guys into Inquisitors. You can't tell me this character doesn't look perfect for the job. Plus, with the items that I kitbashed onto this figure, I could easily use this as a replacement for the Interrogator or the Icon Bearer. The final figure we kitbashed is the Crossbow dude, and this is easily my least favorite of the video. I ended up snipping away from the crossbow itself, leaving just the body intact, and I began snipping and sanding down a melt-a-gun from the Blooded KillTeam kit. My goal was to glue it on once it was halfway sanded down, and I didn't really adhere to that plan. I pretty much chalked this entire section down to the idea being very good and the execution being very poor. Had I stuck to the original plan, I think this would have turned out a lot better. I don't necessarily hate this miniature, I just really don't care for the end result. Especially when I assembled the arms fully, I was really excited to see how this would look. See, this miniature in particular, I had a really difficult time figuring out what I wanted to do with him. None of the units in the original KillTeam use a melt-a-gun, or any long weapons for that matter that would fit these arms. It doesn't even look terrible at this point, but I ended up using a lot of sprue goo to fix it, and I'm saying fix with air quotations. I definitely used a little too much. I probably should have just stuck to pure Tamiya once it was adhered. And as you can see, I needed to shave this down a little bit more too. I'd attach a melt-a-gun cable to it, and at this stage it actually looks pretty good. But then the sprue goo. Oh lord, the sprue goo. Too much, man. Too much. There are a lot of little cracks on this model, as again these are push fits, so that's to be expected. So to seal these in, I used a little bit of Tamiya and then a little bit of liquid green stuff. I'd also continuously seal in the lines of the melt-a-gun, and I really hate how this looks. So I ended up sweeping these details onto the carpet of 2 purity seals. To kind of detract from this ugly bit, I decided to add on this charm box. This piece comes from the Inquisitorial kit itself, and honestly this addition kind of makes me dislike the figure less. Maybe I'm being a little too hard on myself, but man, I really don't like how this figure turned out. I'm still left with quite an ugly spot on the melt-a-gun, but whatever. At the end of the day, hopefully a good paint job will make this figure look a little bit better. I desperately want to use the excuse that all kitbash minis kind of look ugly before they're painted, but I feel like that'd just be coping. So as a little bonus to alleviate the mess that I created with this mini, I may have made another Khador Gang Inquisitor.
What? Stop! Fucking stop!
This is a direct replacement for the Penal Legionnaire in the original kit. So the Khador Gang set actually comes equipped with hand flamers, and this works well to our advantage. We'll want to cut off this weird bone-wielding hand, and replace it shortly after. To do so, we're going to trim down this chainsword arm from the Blooded KillTeam down to the hand. We'll then want to slice off the chaotic symbols on the sides, And then it's just a simple matter of sanding it down completely flat, leaving no remnants of the original iconography. We'll also want to sand the back of the hand, and then we'll glue it to the mini. After that, we're good to go, but we need a melon. Since I already had the Trader Guard sprue out, I figured I'd use this clearly well-adjusted young lady as the face for our zealot. And as a final little piece, I glued on a prayer book. I'm sure her prayers are filled with benevolence, love, and tolerance. And with that, I'm left with 4 great-looking inquisitorial miniatures. I know, I'm being a little harsh on myself, but I really can't help but feel I need to figure out something a little bit better for this guy. Hell, if you guys have some better ideas, I'd love to see them in the comments. Speaking of which, like I said earlier, if you found the video enjoyable, or more importantly helpful, I'd really appreciate it if you left a like, comment, and subscribe for more videos like this. I'm really starting to see some amazing growth from these kit bashing videos, and I quite enjoy making them. But I think I've flapped my beak enough for one video, so I'll leave you with a mishmash kit bash, and paint some fantastic miniatures. And you're gonna. I promise. See ya.